All right, you could begin.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. Today, me, Zahir Chaitlal, and my colleagues Cindy Peters and Jamaria Dollaway will be presenting Chapter 6, Leading with Integrity and Moral Purpose. So let's begin. So to start, I want to introduce three ethical dilemmas in leadership. Imagine being faced with the following situations. As a newly appointed member of your residence hall committee, you discover it's routine to make illegal copies of rented DVDs from a major distributor. When you raise concerns, the response is simply, everyone does it. So let's go on to the next dilemma. You are tasked with overseeing elections of your organization, where a bylaw requires all officers to maintain a minimum GPA. However, no one checks this. No one checks if this is enforced. Your best friend, who you know falls short of the requirement, submits a GPA verification form regardless. And the last ethical dilemma I want to present to you is that at a campus philanthropy event, you witness a participant misusing donation funds to buy alcohol. The participant happens to be your professor's daughter, leaving you unsure of how to proceed. So these scenarios highlight the types of ethical dilemmas that we often encounter. Our instinct may be to either resolve the issue quickly or ignore it altogether. However, both reactions can lead to long term consequences for our character, reputation, and ethical standards of our organization. So, the importance of ethical reflection. Quick fixes and avoidance are not effective solutions for ethical issues, as pressures like competition and reputation can lead to poor judgment and unethical choices. Instead, leaders should pause and reflect before acting, involving others in decision-making process to develop more thoughtful and ethical solutions. Taking time to reflect on ethical dilemmas allows for more comprehensive understanding of the situation, and collaborative decision making can foster a sense of shared responsibility and accountability within a team. So, in this chapter, it builds on previous discussions of ethics in leadership. So, firstly, it explores how to create and sustain ethical in organizational environments. Secondly, it analyzes the moral dimensions of transforming leadership theory, which focuses on leadership that inspires and elevates the moral values of both leaders and followers. And thirdly, it examines how participants influence their organization through behavior modeling. A well rounded understanding of ethical leadership not only enhances individual leadership skills, but also cultivates a supportive ethical culture within organization. Behavior modeling can lead to, excuse me for a moment. Oh, sorry. Okay, let me pick up back there. Behavior modeling can lead to significant impact on followers, as they often look to their leaders as example. So let's move on now to our first topic, creating and sustaining an ethical organizational environment. To build an ethical organization, it is crucial to integrate ethical theories, codes of conduct, and moral awareness. Nash outlines four key traits for fostering ethics. The first trait is critical thinking to analyze dilemmas. The second trait is integrity to uphold personal and professional ethics. The third is empathy to view situations from others' perspectives. And the fourth is motivation to consistently strive to do what is right. Integrating these traits into the organizational culture ensures that ethical considerations are at the forefront of decision-making process. Each trait supports each other, forming a holistic approach to ethical leadership that can significantly improve the organizational health. So let's move on. Creating an ethical organizational environment involves intentional actions based on the relationship model principles of knowing, being, and doing. Leaders Leadership is a shared responsibility, fostering accountability and open moral dialogue. Empowering members to hold each other accountable builds lasting ethical culture. Clear core values should guide decisions, as recognizing ethical behavior strengthens integrity while ignoring misconduct that undermines it. The relationship leadership model, emphasizes the importance of relationships in fostering ethical environments. Leadership should be Leaders should be provocative in setting clear expectations and values, as this creates a framework for accountability. So now I want to take you to a small case study of the infamous Enron collapse of the early 2000s. It shows the dangers of ignoring ethics in business. Despite a detailed code of ethics, leaders like CFO Andrew Fastow overlook conflicts of interest, leading to the company's downfall. This proves that without real commitment, even strong ethical policies can fail. So now I will play for you a short video on Enron's collapse.
In August of 2000, Enron stocks reached a price of $90.75, giving the energy company a market cap of nearly $70 billion. This made Enron the seventh largest publicly traded company in the U.S. at the time. The lights would never shine so bright again, however, and darkness was on the horizon. As the dot-com bubble burst and competition in the energy trading world increased, profits declined, and the pressure from shareholders began to build. With founder Ken Lay, CFO Andy Fastow, and COO CEO Jeffrey Skilling at the helm, Enron began to execute questionable accounting practices to mask the company's deteriorating value. Enron employed mark-to-market accounting, a technique used to include future gains from contracts into current income statements, combined with the practice of discarding poor-performing assets to special-purpose entities, hiding significant losses to create the illusion of stable, growing profits. Internal whistleblower Sharon Watkins, along with investigations by suspicious external analysts, led the curtain being pulled back and the fraud was exposed. $74 billion were lost, including the retirement accounts belonging to thousands of Enron employees, as the stock price plummeted to under $1 by November of 2001. The company filed for bankruptcy the next month. The auditing firm Arthur Andersen admitted to being complicit in hiding the shady accounting as well as shredding documents in an effort to cover it up. Stronger regulations in the form of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act were implemented in 2002 to create strict new rules for record-keeping as well as impose harsher penalties for those in violation. Lay, Skilling, and Fastow were all convicted on a number of counts of securities and wire fraud and given prison sentences. Lay died, however, before serving any time. Fastow was released in 2011. Skilling was released in February of 2020.
Okay, so the Enron case serves as a cautionary tale for leaders about the importance of genuine ethical commitment rather than superficial compliance with codes. Organizations must prioritize ethics to maintain trust with stakeholders and the public.
In August of 2000,
Sorry, let me move on. So now let's talk about toxic leadership and its impact. Leadership doesn't always promote ethical behavior. According to Lipman Blumen, toxic leaders harm followers and organizations through destructive actions, such as fostering illusions of power, promoting fear, and violating human rights. Followers can also enable toxic leaders, worsening the environment. Recognizing the harms of toxic leadership can help prevent unethical climates. Toxic leadership can create a culture of fear, which stifles open communication and ethical discussions. Organizations need to establish checks and balances to prevent toxic behaviors from taking root. So move on to rewarding ethical behavior. To promote an ethical climate, publicly recognize members who show moral courage and uphold organizational values. Address unethical behavior privately, ensuring accountability, confidentiality, and due process. Ethical leadership should reward good behavior and handle violations constructively. Celebrating ethical behavior not only reinforces the importance of values, but also encourages others to act ethically. Addressing issues privately can protect individuals involved and contribute to a more constructive resolution. So let's move on to our next topic, which is moral purpose as an act of courage. Exercising moral purpose in leadership requires personal courage. Standing up for what is right often comes at personal cost, as shown by in the Enron example, Sharon Watkins, the Enron whistleblower who exposed their malpractices. Watkins risked her job, reputation, and career by acting with integrity. Her choice highlights the courage needed to uphold ethical standards despite the risks. Moral courage is crucial for ethical leadership. Kidder defines this as quality of mind and spirit that enables someone to confront ethical challenges confidently while facing opposition. Moral courage is not just about individual actions, it also inspires others to take a stand against unethical practices. Leaders who demonstrate moral courage can create a ripple effect, encouraging a culture of integrity within their organizations. So now we move on to our next topic, which is the three components of moral courage. According to Kidder, moral courage resides at the intersection of three elements. The first being principles, an ethical framework that guides action based on core values such as honesty, fairness, and justice. The second being danger, the recognition that taking a principled stand may lead to personal loss, such as job security, relationships, or social standing. The third is endurance, the willingness to persist through hardship, including opposition, isolation, or tangible repercussions, in order to uphold one's values. Understanding these components helps leaders prepare for the challenges they may face when upholding their values. Each component reinforces the other, forming a robust foundation for moral courage. The example of Nelson Mandela is often cited as a powerful case of moral courage. Mandela endured 18 years of imprisonment for his unwavering opposition to apartheid in South Africa. He was fully aware of the personal danger he faced, but he never retreated from his principles, showing remarkable endurance in the face of extreme hardship. Mandela's story exemplifies the ultimate sacrifice one make for their principles, inspiring others to stand firm in their beliefs. His legacy is a reminder that moral courage can lead to societal change. So now on we move to our next topic, which is the challenge of moral courage in leadership. Leaders often struggle to maintain integrity under external pressures, facing ethical dilemmas that can jeopardize personal or organizational stability. Ignoring unethical behavior weakens both leadership and the organization's moral foundation. True moral courage involves doing what's right despite the risks, making sacrifices to uphold ethics, and it is key to responsible leadership. Leaders should create an environment where teams feel safe to express their concerns and report on ethical behavior. Consistently demonstrating moral courage reinforces the importance of ethics in leadership. So let's look at some everyday examples of moral courage. While figures like Nelson Mandela are celebrated, moral courage is often displayed in everyday life by our local leaders, educators, and peers who stand up for fairness, resist unethical shortcuts, and defend others' rights. Consistent moral courage is vital for fostering ethical responsibility, showing that principled action is essential for the integrity of any group or community. In short, ethical leadership requires a commitment to principles, risk awareness, and the will to persist. Everyday acts of moral courage may not receive public recognition and are crucial for building culture of integrity. Encouraging moral courage at all levels can create a more ethical and responsible community. So, with that said, let's move on to assumptions about ethical leadership. The study of ethical leadership is essential to understanding what distinguishes good leadership from mere effectiveness. Lucas and Anello provide 8 key assumptions about ethical leadership, which challenge common myths and highlight the integration of ethics in leadership. And we will start with the first, which is ethics is the heart of leadership. Ethics lies at the heart of leadership, making it a core component rather than an optional or secondary consideration. Good leadership is not just about achieving goals, but doing so through a morally sound approach where integrity means justifies the end. Leaders should be mindful that their decisions reflect values, and these values significantly influence their team's morale and performance. Emphasizing ethics in leadership encourages more collaborative and trustworthy environment. The second of these values is all leadership is values driven. Leadership is shaped by personal values such as justice, fairness, which influence a leader's style. Organizations reflect the values of their members, making ethical leadership dependent on upholding principles that promote fairness and good practices. Recognizing the values that drive leadership can help organizations align their mission and goals with their ethical standards. When leaders prioritize their values, they create a culture where everyone feels empowered to act ethically. The third of the values is personal values intersect with organizational values. Ethical leadership starts with self reflection on personal values and their alignment with organizational values, guiding leaders in making decisions based on both. This alignment is crucial for sustaining ethical leadership. So, leaders should regularly assess their personal values and ensure they are in harmony with the organization's mission. A mismatch between personal and organizational values can lead to conflict and disengagement among the team members. So, the fourth value is ethical leadership can be learned. Ethical leadership is a skill developed through experience, reflection, and practice. Leaders improve by facing real world ethical challenges, continually refining their ability to make fair and just decisions. Developing ethical leadership skills requires ongoing education and self awareness. Organizations can provide training and resources to help leaders navigate ethical dilemmas effectively. The fifth of the values is linking ethical thought and action. Ethical leadership goes beyond ethical thinking. It requires applying ethical reasoning in practice. Leaders must align their values with actions to make leadership both effective and ethical. Ethical reasoning involves not only considering the implications of decisions, but also taking actionable steps to ensure those decisions reflect core values. Leaders who model their ethical behavior create an environment that encourages others to do the same. And now we will look at the sixth value, which is character development is essential. A leader's character is defined by their actions, not just words. Ethical leadership requires aligning beliefs with behavior. Leaders who don't walk their talk risk losing respect, making character development essential for ethical leadership. Building character involves self reflection, accountability, and a commitment to personal growth. Leaders must demonstrate consistency between their words and actions to maintain credibility and trust. Let's look at the seventh value, which is ethical leadership is a shared process. Leadership is a shared responsibility, not limited to those in authority. Ethical leadership involves all members of an organization working to uphold ethical values, with both leaders and participants obligated to act ethically and advocate for what is right, even at personal risk. Encouraging a shared responsibility for ethical behavior fosters a sense of community and collective accountability. When everyone is engaged in ethical practices, the organization can achieve a more profound and lasting impact. So let's move on to our eighth value, which is everything we do teaches. Role modeling is crucial in ethical leadership. Leaders' behavior sets the standard for others. Ethical, ethical actions foster a culture of integrity, while unethical behavior undermines trust and sets a harmful precedent. So now let's move on to the next topic, which is cultural assumptions about ethics. Ethics may differ by culture, and cultural relativism acknowledges that ethical standards are often society specific. For instance, while the oppression of women in Saudi Arabia is deemed unethical in many places, it is accepted there. However, scholars like Kidder argue that universal values such as truth, justice, and courage exist across cultures, even if their application differs. Similarly, Seligman identifies six core virtues: wisdom, courage, love, justice, temperance, and spirituality that appear across religions and philosophic traditions. These shared values suggest that ethical leadership, though context specific, can follow universal values. So, understanding cultural differences is crucial for ethical leadership in a globalized world. Leaders must navigate these differences sensitively while striving to uphold a universal ethical principles. So, now let's talk about ethical leadership in a global context. Ethical leadership is more complex in its global context, where leaders navigate diverse cultural norms, legal systems, and ethical expectations. Corruption, for example, is perceived differently across countries, as indicated by Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index. Leaders must balance adapting to local conditions while maintaining core moral values in multinational organizations. Understanding cultural differences is crucial, especially when local norms conflict with those of leaders' home country. The goal is to respect local cultures while adhering to universal values. So, understanding the the culture, leaders must be adaptable and culturally aware in recognizing that ethical standards can vary significantly from one context to another. Striking a balance between respecting local customs and maintaining personal organizational integrity is essential for effective ethical leadership. So now I will pass you on over to Cindy Peters for our next topic. Cindy? Oh, I'm told that Cindy is getting a sudden internet issue. Do excuse us for a moment, sir. Let's see if she can reconnect.
All right. Hi, good afternoon. Can you
Cindy,
hear
you're
me?
back? Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a bit of problems, but I'm back now. All
Okay,
right.
no problem.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I will be taking over from here. And my first topic I will be talking about is ethical theories and moral purposes. The study of human behaviors as it relates to ethics and ethical development, which is back to the philosopher kings, as well as the 18th and 19th century philosophers as Immanuel Kant and John Stuart Mill. Ethical theories provide a glimpse into how human judgments are made and the thought processes that individuals engage in to solve ethical dilemma and other problems. A theory that includes a strong component of ethics and morals is transforming leadership theory. Transforming leadership theory is a process in which leaders and followers raise one another to higher levels of morality and motivation. This is from James McGregor Burns. First introduced by him, this style of leadership focuses on creating long-term changes in individuals and social systems. It includes a strong component of ethics and morals and teaches moral dimensions when the leaders and participants' behavior and ethical aspirations are elevated by mutual influences on one another. This style of leadership contrasts to another leadership style, transactional leadership, for several reasons. We're going to take a look on a short video talking a bit of the difference of the two styles. Next slide, please.
Let's take a look at the differences between transactional versus transformational leadership. There are two types of leadership, transactional and transformational. Transactional leadership refers to the bulk of leadership models which focus on the exchanges that occur between leaders and followers. Transformational leaders, on the other hand, engage with others and create a connection that raises the level of motivation and morality in both the leader and the follower. Let's take a look at the differences between transactional versus.
Okay, so on the table here, it shows a bit more on the differences between transactional and transformational leadership. So like the video mentioned, it states that transactional leadership focuses more on the exchange between the leader and the follower. And usually, as stated on the table, the goals are usually short term. So an example I'm going to use is when you're working at a place, right? And you exchange work for things more or less like salary and other benefits in the organization, such as a bonus or possibly a promotion. However, transformational leadership goes beyond that. It focuses more on long-term goals and inspiring and motivating one another to create change, ideally positive change in the followers with the leader's end goal of developing followers into leaders. Next slide, please. Transforming leadership involves persuasion, a desire to change something, and multi-directional influence relationships between leaders and participants. In any leadership situation, participants can and often do influence leaders to higher ethical ends. Next slide. Here are some values and ideals expressed by transformational leaders. Peace, justice, fairness, liberty, equal opportunity, and people's general welfare. According to Burns, these values are referred to as end values. Next slide. Leaders, superiors, participants, peers, followers, and others influence these values through specific behaviors. The leader's fundamental act is to induce people to be aware or conscious of what they feel, to feel their true needs so strongly, to define their values so meaningfully that they can move to purposeful action. Next slide. Leadership. Transforming leadership theory is about the relationship and influence between leaders and followers. Burns described this symbiotic relationship as an interaction of power and shared values. It is the power of a person to become a leader, armed with principles and rising above self-interest, narrowly conceived that invests that person with power and may ultimately transform both leaders and followers into persons who jointly adhere to model values and end values. The moral purposes of both leaders and participants are the key factors in the transforming leadership process. Next. According to Tichy and Devana, the 7 characteristics that define transformational leaders are courage, value, value drive, lifelong leaders, visionaries, people who identify as change agents, people who believe in people, and people who are able to deal with complexity, ambiguity, and uncertainty. Next slide. So two of the aspects that relate to ethical and moral dimensions of leadership are one, courage. Transforming leaders have the courage to confront reality, even if it's painful, and have healthy egos to withstand peer pressure. Possessing positive self-esteem is a necessary element of leading with moral purpose, which contrasts with leading to win a popularity contest. So, like what my colleague said earlier, right? Courage is an essential value in order to be a transformational leader, as of the many challenges that comes with it. Wanting a change and better for you and others sometimes leaves you isolated and against all odds. So that courage, bravery, and strength is required for you to keep on pursuing that goal and working to make that possible. The next element that relate to that is values. Next slide. Value driven. Transforming leaders to value driven. Core set of values that fairness, liberty, opportunity, etc. Those values are evident in them when pursuing for change, when leading with ethical and moral value. Those values in them helps them and assist them to making long-term goal in creating a better ethical environment for their organization. So the next topic I want to talk about is modeling a moral purpose. Next slide. If persons admire or identify with another person, they'll be more likely to imitate that person's behavior. So let's say, for example, like a role model, somebody you look up to. It could be a celebrity, a leader, etc. It also could be a relative or a friend, and so on, right? You're more likely to take aspects of that person's personality or moral beliefs and incorporate it in yours. This kind of behavior pattern is studied under the term social learning theory. Next slide. Social learning theory, first introduced by Albert Bandura, that's the guy in the image, states that people can learn directly or indirectly from observation or by vicarious learning. So here's some ways you can see that happening. Next slide, please. Observational learning has its history in the practices of ancient Greeks, who refer to this concept as imitation or mindsets. So observational learning can be acquired through 4 aspects, right? So the first one is watching another person engage in activity, right? So, for example, you're watching somebody or you're watching a video of somebody teaching you how to fix something. And while that person is doing that, you're following along as to how to do it as well. Secondly, listening to verbal instructions, podcasts, etc. So the first part, listening to verbal instruction, that's straightforward. So it could be to do this or something more specific, finish this letter by 4 p.m. It's the instructions here and you're executing it, listening to that person. And you have others like podcasts and audiobooks. So you listen to others' point of view or other stuff, and you get a glimpse of what they believe and what are their thoughts on something. And you might end up thinking through like that also. Thirdly is reading. Depending on the type of book you read, the text in it can possibly influence your thinking and widen your perspective in it, and possibly integrating that thought or content from it into your own beliefs. Two perfect examples of this kind could be like self-improvement books or religious texts like the Bible. Media stuff is like shows and videos and things could have more, can have several ethical themes or other aspects from the show that you might end up doing or having a belief in. Next slide. Vicarious learning or behavior modeling have important implications for the leadership process. Behavior modeling by leaders and participants offers a type of vicarious learning in organizational settings. Organizational and community members can learn ethical practices by observing those who model these practices in their leadership approaches. So in an organizational setting, persons observe how models execute these practices and copy it, most likely believing that is the right approach. This could usually be either a good or bad thing, which I will talk about more on the next slide. Next slide. Models or exemplars significantly influence the ethical decision making in organizations and are capable of elicting ethical or unethical behavior. This can ethically and morally impact the organization in either a positive or negative way, depending on the model or example setter's moral or ethical belief. So the next slide will show you two examples. Before I talk about that, the examples, right? As I have stated in the beginning of this topic, you are more likely to imitate from persons you admire or look up to. This goes for organization settings with persons with higher rankings than you are, or a person who happens to be well admired by a group. So examples of how models can influence the ethical decisions. So for the positive, you have a student president of the Latino Union who wants everyone in the organization to feel empowered, will practice sharing power and authority with leaders and members and will create opportunities for members to make meaningful and inspire other organizations to do the same and help people feel more empowered.
One moment, guys. We'll see if we get back Cindy.
Consultant chemist or testing.
Just give us a moment, guys. Cindy is experiencing some internet issues here.
No problem, no problem. We right here waiting.
Can you hear me this time? Yeah.
Yeah, you're back on.
I am sorry for the constant interruptions. I have a very poor internet connection right now. So I will be talking more on the next slide now. Vicarious learning or behavior modeling has important implications for the leadership process. Organizational and community members can learn ethical practices by observing those who model these practices in their leadership approaches. Under behavior modeling, outcome expectation. Outcome expectations is a phenomenon which refers to the anticipation of consequences, either positive or negative results in engaging in a behavior. Persons who see how others are treated for doing a particular thing and will learn whether to do or avoid that action depending on the outcomes of the previous doer. So I'm going to show you a few examples now on the next slide. So an example of this type of behavior modeling from leaders would be a coach benches a star player for violating an NCAA rule despite needing that player for the final playoff game. So the other members of the team would know that's not the play accordingly to the rules and not to break it, or else they will end up in the same situation or much worse. Next example in this next slide, please. Participants' model behavior can also influence leaders' ethical and moral values. A way it can be influenced is from helping the leader understand another point of view through empathy, understanding, etc. An example could be members of a student-owned food corporation influencing the student manager to use empathy in deciding whether or not to dismiss an employee who misworked 3 days in a row to care for his ill elderly grandmother. In this example, participants help the leader understand the point of view of another person, having a bit of an idea of what it is possibly like to be in another person's shoe. Next slide, please. Can you hear me?
You're breaking up.
Okay. Um,
Okay,
Next
we're
slide,
hearing you
please.
clearly now.
Okay, next slide, please. Yes, I think there's a slide before that.
Oh,
Was it?
apologies.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, that was the one. Okay, so modeling can also have external effects that extend beyond organizational boundaries. Participants can affect the ethical climate of organizations, either positively or negatively. These actions can either inspire other organizations to imitate these ethical or moral actions or cause a damage in the company's reputation due to their corporate irresponsibility. So the slide here will show you examples, one positive and one negative. Right, so these here are the examples. So for the positive example, Ben and Jerry's founders modeling a type of socially responsible behavior in the business world, where they've donated pre-tax profits to social programs, which would inspire other companies to commit socially responsible efforts. However, a negative example would be Walmart's recorded history of using discriminatory measures during the hiring process, dependent on the race and sex of the applicants. Next slide, please. Another form of modeling is when leaders or participants engage in discussions of ethical issues or bring up ethical dilemmas that can be resolved through an exchange of multiple perspectives. This can also be referred to as moral talk, which will be the next topic I will be talking about today. So Moral talk. How often have you found yourself in an organizational meeting or in a classroom in which someone raises ethical or moral questions around a particular issue your group is working on? It's often difficult to know how to approach a conversation about moral questions. Leaders and participants will benefit in conversations that allow people to explore the moral complexities and dimensions of problems or dilemmas. This is very useful because the person engaged in moral talks can better understand the issues or the topic being discussed and better understand and maintain the ethical environment. Next slide, please. Bird and Mortals provide an interesting notion of modeling or influencing ethical behavior through verbal exchanges or moral talk or dialogic leadership. The dialogic leader begins discussions with peers and members about what is ethical and what the material interests of individuals are. Dialogic leadership or moral talk can be used in student organizations as a way to model ethical approaches or to help create or sustain as an ethical environment. Next slide, please. Moral talk can be used as a type of modeling where dialogue is used to identify problems. So in a meeting like this, you could talk about the problems that is affecting the organizational setting in a negative way or is challenging the ethical beliefs of others. The same for considered issues, advocating and criticizing policies, which will mean policies that go against ethics and moral beliefs in certain individuals. And also, lastly, justifying and explaining decisions as to why you think this decision was better than the next decision. Next slide, please. Although moral talk can help leaders and participants understand the moral and ethics in leadership in an organization, however, sometimes the talks can be actively avoided for various reasons. So the first reason, okay, before I talk about the reasons, all these reasons here actually connect to one another. So the first reason is avoidance of complex problems with moral overtones. Some people rather just not deal with complex issues because they believe it is too much work to do, or probably they are too comfortable with the beliefs they have. And that sometimes becomes a form of ignorance that causes an issue. Secondly, the protection of the positional leader's own managerial flexibility in solving problems. So secondly, either they don't know how to manage in solving those problems, or the fact that they just don't like when others try to raise an issue to them because sometimes they believe that threatens their status as a leader. Thirdly, the avoidance of dealing with varying ideological or moralistic perspectives. Like the first point stated, some perspectives and beliefs just they are right. And lastly, ethical illiteracy. Either they don't know how to deal with it. Next slide, please. Hi, am I on the next slide? Okay,
Well,
I can see it now. Thank you. Okay, so this lack of discussion on ethics is referred to moral muteness. The potential harm caused by not modeling this through conversations or discussions is the neglect of moral abuses on environment that is indifferent to moral considerations. It's a shared responsibility of members and leaders to initiate moral talk and to avoid moral muteness. Moral expressions have the potential to arouse feelings of connection with moral action. For the modeling effect to occur, the language in moral talk has to be connected with experiences and expectations of people involved in the organization. So people have to expect what outcome they want from that moral talk. What do they want? Do they want to better understand another person's perspective? Do they want to solve an issue or integrate an idea which can ethically enhance the organization? Persons must be willing to have an open mind and listen to others' point of view. And this is how I conclude moral talk. The rest of the following presentation will be led by my colleague, Miss Donovan. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good night. My name is Jane Delaware, and I'll be talking about ethical decision-making models. So firstly, we are approaching leadership with moral purpose. Next slide. Ethical dilemmas in leadership. Leaders face daily ethical dilemmas that require careful consideration. It is not solely the responsibility of the leader to address ethical issues. The relational leadership model emphasizes inclusive and collaborative decision making for the common good. Next slide. Approaches to resolving ethical dilemmas. Methods for addressing ethical dilemmas. Use professional codes of conduct, lawyers, doctors, counselors, campus codes, honor codes, sexual harassment policies, or organizational standards, fraternity rituals, student government bylaws. Next slide. Ethical decision-making framework. Considers ethical decision-making model. Ethical dilemmas are often right versus right choices. Four paradigms: justice versus mercy, short term versus long term, individual versus community, and truth versus loyalty. Next slide. Real world ethical dilemmas. Examples of ethical dilemmas are the Terry case, justice versus mercy, the Gonzalez case, individual versus community, or the David case, truth versus loyalty. Next slide. Ethical decision-making principles. Kidder's ethical principles. Ends-based thinking, greatest good for the greatest number. Rule-based thinking, what would happen if everyone acted this way? Care-based thinking, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Next slide. Ethical decision-making process, steps for decision-making. Carefully analyze and reflect on ethical issues. Work through dilemmas collaboratively and engage moral imagination and creativity to find new solutions. Next slide. Ethical application scenario. So the case study is fraternity cheating incident. You witness your best friend cheating. The choices you have are report the violation according to the honor code, talk to your friend and warn them not to cheat again, or do nothing and risk compromising your integrity. Next slide. 5 ethical principles in decision making. Beecham and Childress, 5 principles. Respect autonomy, do not harm, benefit others, be just, and be faithful. Next slide. The newspaper test. So the newspaper test is basically before making a decision, ask yourself, would I be comfortable if this decision was published in the newspaper? Next slide. So this is our chapter summary. Leading with moral purpose, ethical leadership requires continuous moral development. Collaboratively resolving ethical dilemmas fosters trust and integrity, and the relational leadership model encourages inclusive decision making for the common good. Next slide. So these are our references, and this is the end of our presentation. We'd like to thank you for your time. If you have any questions, now would be the time.
Okay, everyone.